We are now streaming to YouTube.
Great. Thank you very much, Charlene. Thank you, everybody, for coming today. Just before I hand over to BuzzFeed, I'd like to give a quick introduction to Coding Black Females. So we're an organization that started in 2017, and our primary aim is to provide opportunities for Black female developers to develop themselves, meet familiar faces, and network and receive support. So we want to learn and inspire each other and empower the next generation to be able to achieve success. We're really excited to have BuzzFeed this evening, who are going to be teaching us about AI and how they're using that to help moderate their comments. We're really looking forward to this talk. So I'm going to hand over to you now, Paul.
Perfect. And if I press those buttons, you should be able to see my screen. Magic. Well, thank you so much for the warm welcome, Jessie. Hello. Yes, we're from BuzzFeed, which is always a strange sentence to say. My name's Paul. I'm going to point to Gono, who's going to wave at you. And then Agatha, who might also wave. Perfect. And so that's us. Who are we? Who are BuzzFeed? Well, you might have heard of us. I hope you have. That would be really great for our ongoing metrics. But you might not have heard of all of our little sub-brands, our little sort of sister projects, like Tasty, As Is, Goodful, and as of last week, we've absorbed HuffPost, an entire news organization who have all now bundled into our Slack and are adding emojis to it at a terrifying rate. And I found some stats out for you, which I actually didn't know before putting these slides together. I asked our stats team for some interesting stats for a stats slide, and they gave me these stats, one of them being we are the #1 publisher for reach among ages 18 to 34, which blew my mind. Further blew my mind, we are the #1 media publisher on Facebook and the most watched publisher on YouTube when you add all of our brands together, which I thought was wild. And then even wilder, we're #3 on the largest global audience, only behind Google and Facebook, which I'm not too mad about because they're Google and Facebook and they're pretty huge. Specifically us, who are we? Well, my name is Paul. Hello, I am a software engineer on BuzzFeed. Then we've got Gono, a software engineer, also with me on Quiz at BuzzFeed. Agatha, who's responsible for AI and machine learning, hopefully in a making our products better way and not a creepy way. And later, hopefully joining us will be Stacey, who's our manager of talent acquisition. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about work life at BuzzFeed, because we would love for anyone watching who's interested in working for BuzzFeed to apply to our open roles, one of which we will highlight at the end of this presentation. So what's going on here? Why am I wearing a sheep hat and looking like I'm going to fight Caroline, but then hugging it out? Well, Caroline that week was manning the BuzzFeed Tech Twitter account, which anyone in BuzzFeed Tech can run. Ostensibly, you should probably tweet something tech related, but it rarely happens that way. And so Caroline just tweeted, "We've got snow in New York." I said, "I'm soggy, Caroline." She replied with a dad joke. And so I thought it'd be good to summon her to have a fight. And so instead we hugged it out and it all ended well. If you were to take over our Twitter channel, you would have to beat Sam Thurman's current best tweet, which is this one about him eating boba tea the wrong way using a knife and fork, which is nothing at all to do with tech and just upset a bunch of people about how wrongly he's eating boba tea. So if you can do better than that, please, someone take the reins. So what is work life like at BuzzFeed? Well, it's pretty much as fun as you can have at work while, being at work. And I've worked for a range of companies. I've worked from everything from tiny startups where I'm responsible for a quarter of the company to being a tiny, tiny cog in a huge corporate machine. And I found the balance at BuzzFeed to be really nice. And it's definitely unlike any other workplace that I've been to. And you'll probably have similar talks from people at Amazon or Microsoft who claim that they're fun. But hey, we've got photos to prove it. And we actually do have a really nice time and a really nice culture, which I enjoy. We've got proof. Amazon doesn't. Ask them for proof. We have great internal mobility as well. I started off as a low-level software engineer within BuzzFeed. I'm now a staff software engineer. That is not responsible for making software about staffing resources, which several people now on LinkedIn have tried to connect to me about. It's a level. So we've got software engineer, senior staff, principal, and then architect. And we don't really know what the architects do. They're just kind of all powerful. But Ian, one of them, he's very nice about it. We also have ERGs, employee resource groups. An example of one of those is Out UK, which I'm a member of, which is our LGBTQ plus support group for the London office. And the nice thing about our ERGs is that we don't just expect people to put the emotional labor of organizing them in for free. We pay people to do that. They're also very well resourced. So each year, the Out UK organizes us having a London Pride float where we all dance around and look really silly and throw confetti on the crowds. So the concept of kind of unpaid emotional labor, we're trying to address at BuzzFeed, and the fact that we actually pay for our ERGs to be managed, I see as quite a positive sign of the health of the company. We actually have benefits that you'll care about and use. A lot of companies will give you as many free peanuts as you can eat. And don't get me wrong, we do that as well. Most of our snacks are vegan nowadays and ostensibly healthy, but good news for Gono is that we've got an unlimited bucket of Kinder Buenos on the wall of the office at the moment, which is often empty when Gono's in the office. It's kind of strange that, but
No shaming.
when we can go, I'm not shaming. I mean, look at the man, he's gorgeous. But I am saying that I'm looking forward to going back into the office for the snacks, because at the moment I only have a wall of alcohol and it's really impairing my productivity, to be honest. So the benefits are great. We have full dental, full health, which we've all taken great advantage of. Every day is a learning day. That's a good and bad thing, because each time I learn something, it pushes something old out of my brain. But luckily, the stuff that I learn at BuzzFeed tends to help my career and help me move forwards. And we really value a diverse set of opinions when building our products. So we get opinions from as many different backgrounds and cultures as we can to inform the products that we're building. And I'm really proud of that as someone that develops things at BuzzFeed. It's not just a bunch of people that look like me making products. It's representative, as we can be, of our entire audience. And we're trying to make it closer to that every day. And one of the key parts of our engineering manifesto, which I thought I'd highlight here, is that we hold strong opinions, but with low ego. So I can give you 100 really strong ideas about how a product should be built and on which technology. But if someone else comes along and says, hey, what about this other thing? I'm not going to just shout them down and go ahead with it. We hold it with low ego, and we work with compassion to make sure that everyone is heard. And we end up with the best product at the end of the day, selfishly. So what do we do? Well, here's some examples. This one's from the ads team in the US. They went pre-COVID times to go and draw on a giant chalk wall. I say pre-COVID because it looks like they're not standing near each other, but I promise you they like each other, and they were just drawing on different parts of the wall. We've also got the Tasty team there, and we are currently building the London office to have a built-in Tasty kitchen, which is great because the New York office has the Tasty kitchen built in, and there's a Slack notification channel for whenever they have finished recording something, we all get to eat the thing that they have made. So there's loads of like delicious food hot and ready all of the time, and an absolute swarm of people come running down to try and get it before it disappears. There's also some mini golf on the roof there. You can see that's the Minneapolis office. So it's probably currently under 10 feet of snow, but when you can see the roof, there is some good fun golf up there. But during COVID times, what are we doing now? I mean, this is my glitzy living room. I've been here nearly a year now. So we are doing weekly remote Pictionary, which is good fun. And we are meeting up where quarantine allows. The London office like to get together around a very specific log in Brockwell Park, which has become a core part of keeping us all sane, is the log of Brockwell Park. Here are some of the meetings that happened pre-COVID times. We had a Women in Tech in New York showcase, really, of all of the work that ERG has been doing and encouraging recruitment again. In the middle there, you can see some of our beautiful London team. We like to go out for pie and mash, because I think you can tell a lot about a person by the type of pie, gravy, mashed potato, and sausage choices that they make. You know, there's unlimited combinations, and you can really get a fingerprint from someone off that. We also host tech talks every week. If you've got something even remotely related to tech, even if it's really tenuously remotely related to tech, come and share it with the entire tech organization. The microphone is yours. So anything that you're excited and passionate about, you can share with your colleagues. And visiting other cities when we can. London compared to New York is a small satellite office. So usually once or twice a year when we can, we'll be out in New York meeting our colleagues and pretending to do serious work that we need to be in the same city for, but mostly just enjoying being in New York together. And the last thing I'll go on about is Hack Week, which is a week where you are encouraged not to do your normal work and to do something interesting. And I always take that opportunity to be a bit of an idiot. Year before last, I built a quiz that gave you where you should go on holiday based on how long and how loud you screamed into your phone to release your stress and tension. And it would tell you where to go to unwind and relax. And this year, I've made a rucksack that would feed me juice through a tube if I did something that we wanted you to do on the website, like leaving a comment, for example. It would reward me in real time with some delicious juice pumped directly into my mouth. But otherwise, some people will go and improve an API, go and make a service a little bit better, improve documentation if they want to be boring about it. But Hack Week is chaos and cupcakes, and we love it. So that's a little bit about our work life, and I will hand over to Agatha and Gono to go through your feature presentation of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, hi, my name is Agatha, and everything that Paul said is true. He actually did build a machine to feed him juice. But today I would like to talk about something a little bit less crazy and show you a recent tool that we've built and talk a little bit more in detail about how we work at BuzzFeed. So we're going to talk today about a comments moderation tool. As the title of our talk says, Robot Helping Humans Building Moderation at Scale for BuzzFeed Comments. So first, to give you some background, a few months earlier, we built Comments API, a new service for storing and serving comments. So as you probably know, we've got many articles and quizzes on our website, and logged in users have the ability to write a comment under like every piece of content we create. So for example, here on the bottom right, you can see that two people from the same high school in a small town in Montana found each other in our comments, where like Mo says, at number 4, do I know you? I'm originally from Billings, and I knew a kid named Montana Billings too. I went to school with him and his 2 older brothers at one point, LOL. And someone responds with, you possibly do. We probably both went to Skyview at the same time, which is pretty cool. Or someone says, I needed to smile and that turtle did it, which was cute. But unfortunately, not all our comments are so nice and wholesome. So here you can see a comment of a user trying to recruit people to join Illuminati. And I guess it's cool that if you're a commenter on BuzzFeed, you're cool enough to join. But anyway, like logged in users have the ability to flag those kinds of comments. Like if they think it's hurtful or spam, or they don't want people to join Illuminati. And some people also flag comments that they disagree with, but please don't do it. But if 15 people decide to flag a comment, it gets added to the moderation queue, where it will be revised by one of our community moderators. So like I mentioned previously, like we had an alt comment system, and we had an alt comments moderation tool to work with the alt system. But as we built a new commenting system, we saw the opportunity to build a new improved comments moderation tool. Because as you can see here, there was clearly a need for a better, nicer comment space at BuzzFeed without Illuminati in it. So where do we start when we start a new project? The first thing is planning. And when you plan, it's good to document all the decisions that you've made and all the reasoning behind those decisions. So then when later someone asks you why you did it that way, or why did you do it at all, you don't have to remember what was the thought process. So the first thing that you need to do is the product doc. which answers the questions what and why. What are we doing in like large brushstrokes, and why are we doing it? How are we going to measure success? To take comments moderation tool as an example, context is that in process of supporting the new comments API, we wanted to make some much needed improvements to the comments moderation tool. So the opportunity was, because of the workflow difficulties with working with the old tool, the moderators had a problem making a dent in the large queue of comments that needed moderating. So we had the opportunity to address those difficulties, make their jobs easier, and make the tool easier to use. But how do we measure that? So our objectives were to remove old comment system dependencies from the comments moderation tool, basically like connect the new comment system, and then significantly improve the speed of moderating comments. And our key result was to hit inbox 0 with the queue, to have like 0 comments that need to be moderated. And the resources are the links to any other docs that might be useful, like technical doc. So speaking of, a technical document contains another set of decisions that need to be taken before you start working on a new project. You specify there what exactly are you going to build, an API, a queue, a more complicated system. So in our situation, we were building a new comments moderation API and UI. And then what is gonna be the functionality of this thing that we're building? And in our example, we wanted to be able to sort the comments in the queue by the number of flags, thinking that the most flagged ones are the most like hateful or bad ones. Or for example, by the date added to the queue. So if we have a large queue, we can first deal with the ones that were added the earliest, so we know that they are more relevant and more people potentially can see them. And then the other questions that you can answer, or you should answer in the technical doc, is how are you going to do it? So here we were thinking about the roadmap and which steps needs to be taken. What do we need to do at the beginning? What needs to happen after what, etc. And then rollout. How are we gonna deploy it to production? And who should receive updates about the progress? And who should receive an update that, for example, this thing is in the production? Which is the stakeholders section. And in our case, that was the team of moderators who will be using this tool in the end, and the head of community team and the head of BuzzFeed.com. Another important thing to establish is the staffing of the project. So how many people do we need? What are the roles that we need? And taking comments moderation tool as an example, I was the team lead and a backend engineer on this project. And then we had 2 front-end engineers. Gono was a front-end engineer. And then a QA engineer who was checking every new feature on stage. Stage is our test environment that mirrors the production environment. And then we had a data scientist who worked on a machine learning model, but more on that later. And now I'm gonna hand it over to Gono, who's gonna talk about tools that we use when working on this project.
Yeah, thank you, Agata. So yeah, as Agata mentioned, I was one of the front-end engineers on this project. And just before we start talking about how we engineered the front end, I just want to talk about some of the tools that we use at BuzzFeed, just to set some extra context here. So we use a myriad of tools over on BuzzFeed in our day-to-day work. The main reason for us choosing a bunch of these tools is primarily to encourage interoperability between the tools, and we tend to choose tools that work very well together, and you'll see that as we go through some of these. So the first tool that we make use of is Docker. Docker is an application runtime. It allows us to build our applications within virtual machines, tiny virtual machines that we have full control over the environment in which they run in. And the fact that they're so small means that they're super scalable. So for instance, if our website starts seeing a bunch of increased traffic, for instance, when a time zone comes online, New York will come online around 2 in the afternoon for us here in the UK, we'll see a bunch of increased traffic as a result of that, and our containers will respond and spin up more instances of our applications in order to respond to that. In AWS land, if you're familiar with EC2 instances, Docker makes use of the ECS and EKS instances. So just far more scalable than traditional application. The next tool that we make use of is one that we built in-house. This is a program we call Rig. Rig has a lot of jobs, but the long and short of it is it's our building and deployment pipeline. So as we're creating code, as we're writing PRs and submitting those to GitHub, we essentially spin up copies of our applications, and these copies are Docker instances, and we will run tests against those. And in your PR, you'll see a bunch of checks automatically kicked off by Rig that will be testing your software. And similarly in deployment, as soon as a pull request is merged, Rig picks that up and it automatically cycles all of the old instances of the application that you're trying to deploy out and the new instances in. And it also supports local development. So our applications, when we're developing them locally on our own machines, are as close to the production structure and environment as possible, which alleviates a lot of the guesswork in how our applications will function locally on our machines versus how our users will see them. The next tool I'm sure you're familiar with is GitHub. We keep our source on GitHub. We also use it for code reviews and pull requests. The main difference at BuzzFeed in the way that we use GitHub is we have a mono repo, and it's the first time that I'd sort of come in contact with the mono repo, but essentially the idea is all of our code lives within one repository and folders underneath that repository. And this really aids visibility. So for you as an engineer within BuzzFeed, there's nothing that's like off limits. There's no secret repos or anything. If I do need to work with another team or understand a service, it's all there and it's on my machine. The other thing is when you're creating changes that are far-reaching, for instance, you're affecting multiple services with some code or a feature that you want to roll out, that only requires one pull request at the end of it, rather than a multitude of pull requests to different repositories that you're trying to time at the exact time to get everything in production and not break. So yeah, that's the main reason why we use a mono repo. JIRA is our product management tool. All of our tasks, our day-to-day tasks, are kept in JIRA. It's essentially a workflow visualizer, so you can see for any given team or project what the tasks look like, what state those tasks are in. And you can also maintain a product backlog, so just like a backlog of all of the tasks that you've got to do as a team. And JIRA supports Agile, so it's also got a Kanban mode if you want to use Kanban rather than a traditional Scrum workflow. And we'll get into that in a bit, but it definitely helps with some of the Agile methodologies that we use here at BuzzFeed. Confluence is our documentation platform. Fairly straightforward. It's a document editor and document repository. The good thing about Confluence is it plays nice with some of the tools that I mentioned previously. So with GitHub, if you were to paste in the link into one of your documents for a GitHub pull request, Confluence will be able to display like a rich preview of that link, and it will show the state of that repository in real time. Similarly, same thing with JIRA. You paste in the link for a JIRA ticket, and you'll also see the live status of that ticket. And all of this just helps tie in our documentation into the actual code and workflows that we use, and it just makes everything a lot more up to date and live when you're looking through documentation. And lastly, one of the tools that we use is Figma. So Figma's the tool that our designers make use of to design interfaces and prototype. It's super cool because it's web-based as well. So all you have to do if you want to preview a design that somebody has created is get a link to that design rather than a 5 GB sketch file. And also it's super smooth in terms of handoff as well. Everything that a designer creates within Figma has artifacts, so you're able to see a live sort of preview of what the CSS or the iOS properties of that might be. So for instance, this is what we would get handed off to us in Figma. This was the initial screen that we had for this project. And this is really where we started thinking about the front end as a whole and architecture-wise. So it's a super great tool for handoff. So yeah, that nicely leads us on to the front end architecture. So specifically with comments moderation UI, there are a few considerations that we had to make around the front end of this project. So there's a few things that we know off the bat, mostly to do with our stack. So like I mentioned, we already use Docker. One thing that I haven't mentioned is Next.js is our tool of choice when creating front-end applications. And that's just because whilst it is an opinionated framework, there's a lot of good opinions in there. And it's also a standardized way of us creating front-end applications. And especially in a large organization, that's a benefit, so that everybody sort of plays by the same rulebook when they're completing their applications. So Next comes along with React and Node built in. And then we've got a few other parts of our stack that are BuzzFeed specific. So we have aBeagle, which is our A/B testing and experimentation based platform. So that decision's made for us there. And then we've got Pixie Dust. Pixie Dust is our client event tracking framework, which we use to instrument our code and monitor the performance of our applications. Okay, so we've got the stack and we've got the designs. So for us as front-end engineers, we sort of tackle the architecture to begin with. It's a stage in the planning process where we really take a look at what we've been given and how we're going to implement it. So the way that I try to think about it is through these 3 questions. So the main ones is like, what is this application going to need to do? What's the best way to go about structuring this application, given the stack and the constraints that we have? And then what are the options available to us beyond our given stack to actually implement and complete an application? So looking at state for an example with this comments moderation tool, and that first question about what we really need to do in order to complete this project. You take a look at the interface and you can sort of see some of the actions that a user can take when they are interacting with the application. So at the top right there, they've got the ability to delete all the comments that they can see, hide them all, or show them all. But then you've also got the comment units themselves. And for each comment, the user has the ability to sort of earmark or project a selected state that they want that comment to be in before actually clicking the button at the bottom, which allows them to moderate all the comments. So the application is going to have to keep track of what kind of state those comments are in before they press that button. So those top 3 actions might be fairly straightforward. You click the button and something happens. The bottom and main primary CTA does something a little bit differently, and we need to be a bit more stateful about the way that we will create this application if we want to achieve it. So then we move on to the next question around how do we structure this application? What's it actually going to look like? What are the components that we create? So I know this is super colorful here on the right, but essentially what it's trying to visualize is what the state tree looks like, specifically for those stateful components. So we take a look at the UI and we can see that each of those comments is going to be a component. And within that component, you've got those 3 radio buttons, which allow you to modify the state. But then you've got this area at the bottom that shows a running sort of count of the moderation state of all of the things I can see, as well as a button to actually take that action. And all of those things are intertwined and they're going to have to be linked, even though they are in completely separate parts of the application structure. Okay, so those are our 2 constraints around the structure and what we need to do. So what are the options available to us in order to actually get that state management out into the application? And there's 3 main options. One of them is a local state option in React. 2, you've got context-based state. This is relatively new in React, but another option available to us if we want to have a stateful application. And then the 3rd is global state, some sort of state that wraps our application. So the first of those is the local state. This is using the useState hook in React. A pro to this approach is you don't have to do anything. It's there. If you're using React and JSX, it's already side by side with your components. All you have to do is import it. It's built in. It's very declarative. So if you were to create an item in state, you can pass it around quickly and easily. But the cons are that the scope of that state is very limited to the areas in which you're using it. If you want to use it, you have to pass it around. And that can require prop drilling. So for example, in that last photo where we had all of those components, the main component would have to know all of the state in order for those children in different areas of the application to actually be able to share that state. So local state is a bit unwieldy for our purposes, and we chose not to go with it. The next is context. So context is the ability to provide and consume state anywhere within your application. These are 2 sort of very distinct patterns. So the providers can live anywhere within your application, and they can be consumed by anything that occurs within the React state tree underneath those components. The good thing is it's built in, same as the last solution that we had. If you want to use it, it's already there. You're using React, you can use context. Super flexible as well. Like I mentioned, you've got the ability to create a provider, wrap your components in the provider or anywhere within your application and consume those somewhere lower down in the state tree. So you can do whatever you really needed to do with context, and for our purposes, it would definitely work. But the issues with context is it's fairly custom. Every time somebody uses context in React, generally they're creating a new pattern to be used, a new set of variables to be consumed. And all of those implementations are custom, and it can get quite complicated, especially when trying to trace context through your code. It can also lead to a super complex tree. And then the last solution that we looked at was a global state option. So this is actually not React, it's Redux. And similar interface, you've got hooks available to you from Redux. So you can pull in uStore from Redux, and that will allow you access to this globally instantiated state that you can pull from and modify. And that makes updates super easy across the entire application. It's also very scalable. So in order to add a new variable, all you have to do is modify that initial state that you begin with, add some actions, and they're there available to any consumer that wants to make use of them. And because Redux is an event bus, this basically means that any actions that are taken within any of those stateful components. So for instance, I was changing one of those radio buttons. All of those are recorded and passed along an event bus, which means that I could actually replay that bus. And I could also walk back and see what my application looks like at any point in time, given the user's actions. And some of the cons of this global state approach is there's a lot of boilerplate with Redux to start off with, and to get all of this global state set up, you've got to pull in this external library and set up the actions and set up the code. And with the external library comes another consideration, which is package size, especially if you're trying to develop a small web application. That's going to add time in which your users are going to have to download your app and get things running before they actually are able to interact with anything on the screen. And it can also complicate your architecture. Redux is an external library. You do have to learn it, so it's on top of React, which you're already asking your engineers to understand. You've got this additional layer. But for our purposes, Redux really was the right solution, simply because there was so much going on within this application that would happen in different parts of the application tree, that we needed this globally shared event-driven architecture. So Redux was our final choice. Yeah. Cool. So that's an overview of how we come to sort of decisions in the front end at BuzzFeed. I'll just quickly talk about the way that we work process-wise. So we're very much champions of the Agile methodology at BuzzFeed. It works super well for us and our teams. It's an alternative to waterfall. So instead of doing stages of a project in sequence, we tend to take smaller cycles and just iterate quicker. We tend to start off our projects with an MVP. So what I've just described with the front-end architecture was very much our MVP, which will be decorated by the AI that Agata is going to explain a bit later on. But the Agile essentially allows us to have this tight feedback loop. So we're very quickly validating the ideas that we're putting out with our code. And it sort of fosters an experimentation culture. So just to compare Agile to Waterfall and the two models, Waterfall is very much the dominant way of creating software products. But Agile, especially in startups and newer companies, tends to be the way that things are done. And yeah, like I mentioned, it's just because of that iterative approach, especially in a new company or a startup, you're trying to validate an idea. So you're trying to learn quickly. Agile really lends itself well to that and a changing roadmap. But when it comes to quality or mission critical scenarios, for instance, you're creating software for the fire service or trying to land a rover on Mars, Waterfall very much is the way that you want to go for those domains, strictly because you don't get another chance to land a rover on Mars. So when it comes to BuzzFeed, our process and ceremonies that we undertake when it comes to Agile is if the teams are given the agency to choose about how they actually run their process. So if a team is using more of a Scrum sprint-based approach, well, they'll have planning meetings before their sprint start. And if they're going in more of a dynamic Kanban workflow or way of working, then the refinement process tends to be better for our teams. I'll describe what that actually means in a second. Stand-ups, we tend to do daily stand-ups as a team, so either over Slack or video. And then retrospectives, as an organization, we find it super important to take a look back at the ways that we're working or the things that we've done, and use those as learning experiences, use those as ways to improve. And so we've got sort of this Scrum Master role, which isn't a job title, it's more of a role that somebody within the team will hold, just to be responsible for this kind of process. And then as a team, we all sort of have to agree with all of these agile practices in order for them to actually work. You do need buy-in from the engineers and from your team members if you do want to try and improve a lot of the processes that come with agile. So that's just about setting realistic expectations. So a lot of people look at agile and they'll see the meetings and they'll see the ceremonies and think that's a lot of time that I'm going to be spent in a Zoom call. So there's a bit of a consensus that you need to come to with your team members about what you're actually going to be doing, what the point of these meetings are, and that the time that you're spending is valuable, and that what you're doing is truly kind of trying to foster this experimentation culture and make yourselves better whilst doing so. Cool. So that's generally like our agile culture. In terms of the way that we plan and do things within our team and for the comments moderation tool, we focused more on this sort of refinements approach. And I will caveat that this was an experiment with this project. It was just something that we were trying out. Rather than doing an initial plan, we were trying out this refinement process as an alternative to planning. So basically, it's a dedicated amount of time that we're going to spend each day to focus on the tasks that we're going to be doing in the next few days and look ahead. So we're getting these tasks ready just in time for us to sort of work on them. And that allowed us to be sort of dynamic. So if there were changes that a designer wanted to make, we were able to make those changes very quickly rather than having to wait for a planning meeting and next sprint in order to put in a change that we could effectively put into effect straight away. And so it's this iterative process that sort of follows that flow chart at the bottom, where you've got a backlog of just ideas, JIRA cards with a title, and then you go through this refinement process of getting them closer to ready. And that ready very much needs definition. So another thing that we did was define what ready means, right? What is a card that we can pick up off of our JIRA backlog and actually start working on without any question? And that's what the refinement process is supposed to enable, is us to get to this state of ready with any ticket. So the question is very much like, what do we need to start work on a ticket? And you can pick any of these parameters. Generally, a ticket will have a description and some points. Most teams will have all of these things, at least in their heads, but having an actual definition written down, codified in a Confluence document is super useful, because it means that when you're going through this refinements process, you can go through. And for us, we decided to choose a description, implementation details, acceptance criteria, and points as our definition of ready. What those are is description, fairly self-descriptive. Implementation details are to almost the code block, an explanation of what we're actually going to be doing in any given ticket. Acceptance criteria is just a summary of the deliverable that you're going to get from that task. So for instance, I'm going to implement a comment component that can show the current moderation state of a comment. is acceptance criteria. So anybody looking at our JIRA board can see, okay, so once this ticket has been moved across to done, this is what I'm going to get. And then some points is the last thing that would put on a JIRA ticket is essentially just on a Fibonacci scale, how complicated do we feel a ticket is. And then another process that we follow is stand-ups. So these are just daily meetings, 10 minutes, face-to-face. I'm sure you're familiar with these kind of brief updates. The main goal of stand-ups in organizations is actually to remove blockers. It's not about really catching up with your co-workers. It's about making sure that everybody has what they need and hasn't run into an issue. So that's essentially what a blocker is it's just something that's stopping me from doing the work that that I've been tasked to complete. And some of the learnings that we found, especially in the comments moderation tool, is you sort of want to ditch that round robin aspect of stand-ups where it's one person speaks about what they did yesterday and what they're going to do today, and rather you want to focus on your tasks. So a good idea is if you've got a physical board, stand in front of your physical board and look at the tasks and talk about how you're going to get them from wherever they are in the current workflow to the done state. And if you go from right to left, that sort of puts the focus on the tasks that are closest to being finished. And it sort of shares the responsibility of getting tasks done from one individual to the whole team. And lastly, last bit of process that I want to talk about that we do at BuzzFeed is just the retrospectives. So we actually currently split these out. We have separate team retrospectives, which is mainly about the processes that we're taking as a team, and project retrospectives, which is talking about the project and the processes that we took to complete a project in particular. And the goal of retrospectives is, yes, to identify what went well and what could have been better, but specifically in keeping with Agile culture, it's about taking action items. So out of your what could have been better, what can we actually do the next time we do a project, the next sprint that we undertake, to make that particular scenario better for ourselves. And one of the things that is always best to keep in mind when doing retrospectives, because you are looking backwards, it's always great to look in hindsight, but you don't want to be playing a blame game of any kind. The main focus should be on the tasks and the processes that you undertook, and never really the individuals or what specifically happened. So yeah, I'll hand you back to Agata for a bit more on comments moderation tool.
Thanks. Yeah. So Gunnar told you a little bit about how we work. But before we can have a retrospective, there's one final thing that we need to do, and that's actually to put our code in production so that people can use it. And yeah, this is a screenshot of our rig UI, and Gunnar mentioned to you rig before a little bit, but we've got this rig UI where we can deploy a service with one push of a big blue button. And this makes deploys less stressful because we can always revert to a previous branch with like 2 clicks. You choose the branch here on the list on this dropdown, and then you push the big blue button again, and you can quickly revert to your previous changes in your previous branch or your previous master. And it's super simple. And I wish I had some kind of a horror story to tell you about right now and to make this talk more interesting, but it's seriously all that it took. And the next thing that we need to do, yeah, next slide, thank you, Paul, is to look at the dashboards that we previously prepared to monitor the number of errors that we're having and to hundreds. 200 is the response code, and it means that the request has been successful, and we served the comments without any problems, or we moderated the comments without any problems. So if those numbers started changing, like 200s dropping or errors rising, then we would know that something is wrong, and we would quickly revert to the previous branch or previous master. And in this example, we needed to monitor two services, Comments API and Comments Moderation Tool. But fortunately, after our deploy, both services looked healthy. So we went ahead and asked the moderators to start using the new tool. And this is how it looked like after 1 day of the new comments moderation being on production and being actually used by moderators. The impact was amazing. It took them only one day to reach inbox 0. So that was a great speed up when it comes to moderating comments. And we could see that all of this process and closer collaboration with moderators paid off. Yeah, it was so fast that even our moderators were surprised that they don't have much to do. And yeah, here's a small screenshot from our Slack where Taylor, one of the moderators, says, "Is something up with the comment moderation tool, or are there really just no comments right now?" And Sarah responded with, "There were about 5 in there this morning that I moderated, but that was it." So based on that, we decided to introduce a couple of improvements. For example, we changed the number of flags that a comment has to get to land in the moderation queue. Previously, we had 15 flags, so like 15 people had to see a comment and say that it's bad, and we changed that to 10. So also we got more comments in the moderation queue. And that's the thing, though. We didn't really move the needle when it comes to how quickly a comment lands in the moderation tool. In February, when we introduced new comments API, you can see on this first graph that we had an increase in the overall comment numbers. But then when it comes to the graph that shows comments with 10 or more flags, so the ones that reach the comments moderation tool, it's kind of stable, or like I don't really see a clear pattern there. Even it's rising a little bit as the number of comments rises. And it got us thinking that maybe we should think about a way to hide like spammy or hurtful comments before our users can see them. And that's how we decided to invite some robots to read each and every newly posted comment. And Gunnar mentioned Agile to you before, and I think that's a great example where we launched a first version of the tool. We gave the moderator a better way to do their job, but then we also worked on making the tool better. So we decided to tackle this problem from different angles. First solution was to create a list of all the patterns that we want to absolutely ban from the comments. We had many dodgy job ads in our comments, and or like Illuminati recruiters. And we decided to automatically hide comments that have "working on the computer" in it. Or some funky Roman characters to spell paycheck. Or people selling spells in our comments section. No witchcraft in the comments section. I keep saying that, everyone keeps ignoring me, but seriously, don't try to enchant your ex to get them back. I'm pretty sure it's not worth it. And also, obviously, we had some more hardcore examples with some curses and slurs, but I didn't want to post them here. And this is a very effective approach, but it's not very nuanced. So the second tool that we decided to use is Perspective API. And that's a machine learning model built by Google to help classify toxicity of a text. And it rates a piece of text on different categories, like, is it an insult? Is it a profanity? Is it sexually explicit, etc.? So we just send a comment to a Perspective API and then get back the scores for those categories. And as far as I know, I think this model was built on comments posted on the New York Times website. And BuzzFeed's culture is different than New York Times culture, and our audience is different. So we have a lot of quizzes, for example, and many people post their quiz results in the comment section. So that means that many people can post the same thing, the same result in the comment section. And it's not something that we consider harmful or bad. And that's why we decided to build our custom machine learning model, which was built on comments posted on BuzzFeed.com and manually classified by our comments moderators. Here's a simplified graph showing architecture of our new system. And we've got the comments API that writes a comment to the database. And this new comment initially has a neutral spam score. And then comments API emits a comment lifecycle event. And that's what the robot listens to. So the robot runs then each applicable detection module. And so like I mentioned earlier, regex module, Perspective API, our custom anti-spam machine learning model, and reports the results back to comments API. And the robot can take one of three decisions: hide immediately, no action, or add to moderation queue. And hide immediately means that the robot is convinced that the comment is harmful and should be hidden right away. No action means that the comment seems fine to the robot and doesn't require any action. And then add to moderation queue basically means, I'm not really sure, hey, humans, take a look and you decide. And it puts the comment in the moderation queue without hiding it. And it's just a list of modules, so we've got the ability to add and remove modules easily. And then when the robot completes all the modules, it sends an additional message, finish processing, to comments API. And we need that because we don't want to, for example, send notifications that someone replied to your comment if that's a spammy comment. So we're waiting for this finished processing message to send such notifications, for example. But obviously, we don't want to let robots run unsupervised and do whatever they want with people's comments. So that's why we added a new tab in the comments moderation tool, where you can see the latest comments and the latest decisions that robot decided to do when it's either hide immediately or add to the moderation queue. So here you can see that recently one user has been posting the same message over and over that says, kiss to your hand, left hand, say the name of your love, la la la, paste this to 15 comments, la la la. If you don't do it, something will go wrong in an hour. And like I said earlier, we really do not support witchcraft in the comments section. So as a moderator, you can click on show robot decisions and see exactly which module was unhappy with this comment, what was the decision that this module took, and what was the confidence of that decision. And in this example, this message got caught in one of our regex rules. So the regex rule was paste this to. So no other user or moderator had to go through all of these users' comments and flag them or hide them one by one. It was hidden some quick time after being posted. So in that way, we made our users less annoyed with the comment section, hopefully, and our moderators less busy with moderating the same comments over and over again. And here you can see that after we introduced comments moderation robot, the number of reported comments went down, but the number of overall comments posted every day stayed more or less the same, except this weird spike in September, but ignore that. That was a hacker stress testing our comment system. So that's a material for another talk. But in summary, we had over 1 million moderator comments so far, and that's a lot of comments. We have over 100,000 moderated but still visible comments. So comments that our moderators decided that they're okay and are fine to be shown on the site. But then we've got over 1 million hidden plus auto hidden comments, so either hidden by a moderator or by a robot. It took us 1 day to reach inbox 0, which I know that I've mentioned before, but I'm still proud of it. And yeah, we had loads of fun, and we made some friendships along the way, like with the moderators team. Yeah, thank you for listening. And then,
Cool.
yeah, I'm gonna hand it over to Gunnar for this part.
Yeah, cool. Just to mention, like some of the fun things that we get up to at BuzzFeed. So what you saw today was an example of one of the projects that we do. But in the meantime, we've been very busy. We don't work so much on the comments anymore, and we've now focused our efforts on the quiz side of the business. So a couple weeks ago, we released this one-off quiz that was actually a project in itself that allows you to generate AI boyfriend or girlfriend by taking a few questions, and you get like a nice handy little result. It's all meant tongue-in-cheek, but it's great fun, and it's live on the site right now.
I should probably mention that this came about because our CEO had a shower thought. He was just like, hey, what if we made this bananas quiz? And then he put a bunch of us engineers and creatives in the same room and we're like, make it happen. And when your CEO does that, you don't ignore it. You go and make him his crazy shower quiz.
Cool. And yeah, it came out with a great result. We've seen loads of engagement on that quiz. So yeah, super fun project. And it was created in very much the same vein of the way that you've seen today in terms of the comment moderation UI. But yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, we're currently hiring in our London office. That's part of the quiz team that myself and Paul are a part of. And that's for a full stack software engineer. So we'll make that job posting available to you. But with that, that's our part of the presentation done. And I'll hand you across to Stacey.
Hi, everybody. So glad to be here. My name is Stacey Maxwell. So I am a talent acquisition manager here at BuzzFeed. So I just wanted to talk through a little bit about our recruiting process and then talk about just some tips that in my career I've seen and while being at BuzzFeed that will make you successful or help to make you successful during our interview process. So just to kind of give you an overview of our recruiting process at BuzzFeed. So generally speaking, you would have a recruiter call. So usually with someone like me or someone on my team. And that call is really to get a sense of your background, your experience, and just to make sure that from a technical, a skills perspective, as well as experience, that you do meet the basic criteria for the role. And then after that, we usually have what we call like a hiring manager screen, or sometimes we have like a technical interview within that screen or have a separate. At that point, it's really going more into details about your background experience and then kind of looking at your technical experience in a lot more detail. And then, so what we do at BuzzFeed, we do what we call a interview panel, right? For the most part. Again, it varies based on each role, but for the most part, this is how our process is. So we do an interview panel, and in that panel, you'll go into what we call a technical architecture. And a technical architecture interview is where you'll probably talk about a specific project that you worked on, looking at your domain awareness, looking at yourself, just kind of your knowledge in that regard. And then we do have a coding. So coding sometimes will be you working live with another interviewer where you're looking at whether you're building new features or coding on something that's existing. And that's the purpose of that really is to see how well you communicate, how well you're able to collaborate with other engineers, and just how you, kind of think through coding and your process. And then usually you'll have what we call a cross-discipline. So cross-discipline interview involves meeting with the outside of the engineering discipline. So for example, at BuzzFeed, we are very, very collaborative, and a lot of teams work with product design or data. And so in that interview, it would be, how do you collaborate or have experience collaborating? If you don't, because some people, more entry level in their career, we want to understand your interest in those fields and kind of how you would collaborate and communicate if you were to work for BuzzFeed. So my 5 tips, I just want to look back up my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. So going into the 5 tips, the first thing I will say is think about your resume, right? So your resume is the first line that most employers see. That's where we'll get a sense of what your experience has been, what you've done in the past. And one of the things I always say to candidates is think about you reading it, making sure it looks clean and it's, I would say readable, because just to be clear about that, but making sure it's clean, right? You want to make sure when somebody reads it, they get a really good sense as to what you've done. Like, what projects did you work on? What did you code in? And what technologies have you used? What teams have you worked on? How did you work within those teams? What I do, even personally as a recruiter, I've been doing this for a while. I ask my friends or coworkers or colleagues to review my resume too, and just say, hey, take a look. What does it make sense? Is there anything that we could edit? The other thing too, and I personally don't look too much for this, but some hiring managers think it's important, like grammar, spelling errors, things like that. If you have to be detailed, then those are things that a hiring manager would look for. And some recruiters actually do look for that. And if you have a grammatical or spelling error in your resume, sometimes it unfortunately disqualifies you from the process. The other thing I would do is do some research, right? Come prepared to the interview, do research on the company, read the job description. That sounds simple, but there are a lot of candidates I've spoken to and they're like, what's this job again? What's the title? And I'm like, well, you applied. So I was hoping that you would know that. So read it before you come to the interview, get a sense as to what this role entails. And it's okay if you don't understand every single thing on the job description. That's the purpose, right? That's the purpose of the interview, for you to get a better understanding of the job, just the same the hiring manager and the recruiter and the team is trying to get a better understanding of your experience. Think about, based on the interview process I described, I will also say, think about projects that you worked in and come prepared to talk about them in detail. If you're new to your career, you may have worked on a project in school, right? So start thinking about what you did, what your specific role was in the project. Who did you work with? Who did you work with? How did you collaborate with them? And start thinking about that, because those are questions that you're going to be asked during the interview. If you're, later on in your career and you've probably done a relevant project in a previous role, again, start thinking about that before you go into the interview. So that way you're prepared, you can speak to it, and you can go into as much details as possible. I'll also say, think about questions that you want to ask. It does vary with some hiring managers, some teams. Some people are like, well, they didn't ask a lot of questions. Sometimes it come across as maybe you're not as interested in the position or the role. So start thinking about what questions you want to ask as it relates to, the position itself, the company, the culture. Is just as much, we're assessing you and evaluating and interviewing you as much as you are also kind of assessing, is this the company I want to work for? Is this the team I want to work with? BuzzFeed is awesome, so yes, the answer is yes. But you also want to make sure, as you take this step in your career, what exactly are you looking for? And if you're newer to your career, it's totally fine. You don't have to have all the answers, but come with a clear, value in mind, and then ask questions around that to make sure, what this team does embody some of the values that I have, and this company seems to do that. So think about that as you're thinking about the interview process, and come prepared. I personally, as I interview, I write my questions. I'm old school. I write my questions down and I memorize them, and I try to make sure I come into the interview with 3 or 4 questions ahead of time. And as you should be listening through the entire process. So as you're listening in the process, think of questions that come to mind. If anything that you want to clarify, you want to get a better understanding of, totally fine to ask it in that setting. That shows that you are listening and that you're participating in your part, you're very motivated for the role. The last thing I will say is, please don't ghost. If you're not, if for whatever reason, you decide I'm no longer interested in this process, I want to, do something else, or I got another offer, totally fine. That's totally fine. Don't just ghost on the interviewer or ghost on the recruiter. Communicate. I can tell you, it's a very small world, and you don't know who you'd, whether you interact with someone in the future, or who you probably want to reach out to for, whether it's networking, mentorship, or job opportunities. It's fine to share a note and say, listen, thank you so much for your, interviewing with, thank you so much for your interest in me. Unfortunately, at this time, I have to withdraw from the process. Totally fine to do that. And I encourage you, if you want to be upfront and honest with, with the recruiter or with the hiring manager as much as possible, in the sense that if it really isn't aligned with what your career goals are, that's fine to say, because maybe down the line, there might be a role that does align. And then that you'd be the person that they'll think of to say, okay, let me, I spoke to this person, they were great, didn't really work out, but I'll be happy to reach out. If you just disappear and don't respond, very unlikely. And people remember that. That's something I also say. People will remember when you do that. So I'm stressing it. Please don't do that, especially if you continue to progress in your career. And I know everyone is busy. Try to just make sure that you have that open line of communication. So that's my quick spiel. And I guess at this point, do we open up for questions, or do I?
Let's do it. Although I've got a really good GIF here, and I'm going to show it because it's Pasheen. Thank you for having us. Seriously, from all of us, this has been an absolute pleasure. You can find more about the roles on the link that is in the chat. And yeah, let's take some questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. This has been super interesting. And it's been great to hear as well about your culture and how you work, just as much about the project itself. Yes, so the first question we have, I think this is for you, Gunnar. You spoke about using Redux, and Danny has asked, could you see yourself replacing Redux in this project with hooks instead?
I think probably for this one, we definitely made the right decision about what we chose, especially like going forward. The AI wasn't a part of it to begin with, and because it was added in afterwards, it was super easy to scale that and add that in. But for all of our projects, we tend to have this discussion. It ends up happening, especially when we start developing more stateful applications, like the quiz, for instance, is a super stateful use case. It's up to the engineers on the team as to what they want to use. And there's certain teams who prefer the context-based approach. And we're looking to sort of standardize that a bit so that there's some rules that we can adhere to, and maybe take a lot of the guesswork out of that side of things. But yeah, it's entirely possible for us to use the context-based hooks for this project.
Great, thank you. And I think one for you, Agatha. Danny's asked, how do you account for different languages?
Go for it, Paul. I saw you clicking on muting yourself.
Well, it's a great question, and it is one that we considered when we were building the product. Do we teach the robot how to speak every language? And that's a lot of work. That's a significant amount of work. So what we asked first is for the data science team to look at all of the comments and tell us which language they're predominantly posted in. And we came back as something like 95% English comments, including those marked as spam at an even higher percentage. So in the future, if we have a gigantic problem with comments that aren't in English, then yes, we would build a new module that would either translate them or detect them in their native language. But for now, we don't have enough of a problem with non-English spam for us to build it for this first version.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. Another question is, you guys have managed to build the bot system, which seems to be really efficient at moderating questions and flagging the ones it thinks are dangerous or offensive. So Rosario Blue has asked, is there any need for human moderators if they are so efficient? Or do the human moderators serve a different purpose to the robots?
Yeah, I think about machine as very powerful, but stupid, still stupid. So we do need human eyes to look at those comments, and we do use humans to teach the robots still how to make decisions. So I think it's a good news for all of us that we cannot yet get replaced by robots. Yeah, we do have many innocent comments that get flagged as spam or hurtful. And you've seen on the stats that I don't have in front of me right now, but still a lot of comments gets like okay stamp from moderators.
Okay, that's interesting. I saw that with the stamps that the bots give, there's a confidence score associated with that. Have you noticed that? Has that confidence score changed much? Are the bots becoming better at spotting comments?
Paul, do you want to talk about that? I feel like there haven't been much of a difference yet, and it's still a learning process.
They're still learning. Did we ever get around to allowing the robots to learn from the human moderators' actions? Did we do that? Yeah, probably not. So the robots are still pretty dumb.
Yeah.
No, they have the potential though, because there is now all of this human moderation going on that they're aware of. We can train them from that data in the future. So they could, in theory, in the future, learn how to be more like our specific human moderators at BuzzFeed. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add something to that, like one of the ideas that we had is to have the automated process of pulling the latest, like, let's say 30 days of data from comments moderation tool and then feeding it to robot and make it go smarter and smarter. But we haven't done that.
Great, thank you. Another question on the comments is the offensive comments can be subjective. How do you decide what is offensive or not?
So luckily, that isn't up to us as developers. We have the editorial team and the comments moderation human team at BuzzFeed who focuses on that. But the comment section is definitely not a free-for-all. This is not a free speech zone. You will comply with our rules, and there is no one being mean to each other. If it gets out of hand, BuzzFeed will step in and take the comment down. That said, the interesting part about using an AI model from the New York Times is that our audience is so different. We found out the other day by being linked to a news article that our company had started selling sex toys. So we never know what's around the corner for the comments section on BuzzFeed. We have posts all of the time where people are comparing sex toys, or we found out that we started selling them and people are comparing their favorite positions and all these wild words. And if you saw any of those comments in the New York Times, they would immediately be banned. But for us, we love that. Like, come and talk about your favorite sex positions. Why not? We're encouraging it. So as far as it being subjective, yeah, when we plug a lot of our comments into the New York Times perspective classifier, it immediately tells us that all of our comments should be hidden and deleted straight away. So we had to adjust those levels, those confidence thresholds from perspective quite dramatically to stop the New York Times robot deleting all of BuzzFeed's comments. But as far as relative offense, yeah, we're not a free-for-all. We'd encourage everyone to be nice, but it's down to the editorial team at the end of the day.
Great, thank you. Danny's also a follow-up question to the one about training the robots based on the human moderators. Do you think you would need consent from the human moderators if you were to do that?
Well, their actions undertaken at BuzzFeed are part of their work and their employment for us. But no, of course we ask. As their key stakeholders in making the robots better, they're in the room, and we would run it past them first to say, hey, do you want your decisions to be influencing the robot? And if they say no, we probably won't do it. So technically, no, we don't need their consent. But because we're nice people, we'll always ask.
That's really good to know. Thank you. A question from me for all of you is related to your culture. I know that there's a massive emphasis on that at BuzzFeed. I just wanted to know what each of your favorite things is about the company culture at BuzzFeed.
Go, no, you go first.
Oh, you're going to put me in the hot seat here.
Yeah, I am.
There's several things that have sort of translated really well into the world that we now find ourselves living in, and we do have a very open culture in terms of people are available to help and speak to you at any point in time. We also like to allocate time for us to get together and just have chats. So we've got something called Tech Donut, which is a Slack bot that will essentially match you up with somebody random within the company or within tech, for you to have a 30-minute chat every week. And it's a great way. You might get paired with another software engineer or a QA engineer, or you might get paired with the CTO, which is always a great discussion. But yeah, just it's a very welcoming, friendly culture. And yeah, I feel like we work together well, and yeah, it's just great to be around so many talented people.
We seem to unmute ourselves at the same time, Paul. But yeah, I just wanted to echo what Gono said. I absolutely agree. And I had the opportunity to have like a mentorship sessions with a VP of engineering, me being like a simple engineer. And that's pretty cool that I had the opportunity to, during like work time, learn with someone who's like so high up and so more experienced than me. Yeah, and I think we support each other pretty well, like as much as we can now when it's pandemics and we are all at home, and yeah, we cannot like see each other in real life. And also there are like parents of small children who need to juggle like parenting and working. And I think that's pretty cool too.
I think what I'd say, and I mentioned that actually we did a tech talk with the HuffPost team who have just joined BuzzFeed. And so we were like, hey, what's the culture like at BuzzFeed? And the main thing that I said to them is the way that we've evolved is largely through empathy. When I joined BuzzFeed 6 years ago now, the tech team and the editorial team were in physically different offices, and that kind of summed up the whole situation. It was really like divided and cold, and they wouldn't physically sit next to each other. And it was probably just something to do with real estate, rather than them physically hating each other and being put in different buildings. But now they're all in the same building in New York. We sit on a friendship table, we share food, we hug when we can because, oh God, there's a pandemic. But the openness and the willingness to work with each other and being generous with our time and giving everyone a leg up when they need one, that's really important to what I see about BuzzFeed's culture. Everyone has the time to help you out and to upskill you, which I think is really neat.
I guess I will go next. Yeah, I mean, echo everything that Mark, Agata, and Paul said about the culture. And the other thing is too, it's a really great culture if you want to grow and learn and develop your career. Like you have an ability to have ownership of the work you're doing. You can make an impact in your role. So I think it's a really great environment to provide that support for you as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, I think that's been super interesting to hear the culture as well as how you've built this project. I've got one final question about the project itself. What was the biggest challenge, do you think, for putting this together?
We're just playing chicken with who unmutes first. Agata, you were the project lead for this specific one. What threw a spanner in the works?
Damn, what was the biggest question? The biggest.
I mean,
problem?
during your talk, you were like, "Oh, we launched the product and it was absolutely perfect and nothing went wrong." Very humble.
Yeah. I think moderation in general is a difficult thing. Like someone asked that it can be subjective, but when it comes to the project itself and something that we have to
Oh, I remember one.
Please rescue me.
Sure. One of our early designs that we got back had maybe 5 comments per page shown, and then you had to press the button to go and get 5 more comments. And very quickly, the moderators said, please no, please don't do that. And we upped it to like 100 comments per page so that they could do bigger batches, which was actually a pretty significant technical change, like updating the maximum pagination through the entire stack, proved to be surprisingly difficult. But they just told us, no, cut it out. That's not useful. And so we had to change it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Gunnar doesn't remember this project at all now. It's too far away.
No, I can definitely add like to probably the bit that I covered the most about state management. There was a period where we had gone forward with the local state approach, and we quickly realized by looking at the roadmap that it was going to be unwieldy and things were going to break eventually or just become unmanageable. So we did take a step back and took a look at what the solutions were available to us, and just followed that process and came out with the right solution.
Amazing. Yeah, it seems like it was a great success, and it's really cool that you guys all have the data as well to show how much of an impact you had with this project. Yeah, thank you very much for your talk today. It's been super insightful. We will share the job post link for all the attendees today, And yeah, I would also like to ask everybody to fill in the feedback at the end that we'll send out afterwards. And just a quick reminder that we have our International Women's Day celebration happening soon, and everybody is welcome. And a quick push for the makers. We've got our makers scholarships. The applications are opening up next week on the 1st of March. And the Black Coder boot camp, the applications are closing on the 28th of February. So do go and have a look at our socials to find out more about those. But yeah, from us, I'd like to say thank you to BuzzFeed. It's been an incredible talk today. And yeah, I can't wait to hear more. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us and for your time.
Yeah, this has been really nice. Yay.
It's been great. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
I've just realised I'm still the host. Let me end it. I'll see you soon. Thank you so much for this evening. Bye.